The royal guards were known all over the world for their stillness, their discipline, and the serious look on their faces. People traveled from faraway places just to see them standing like statues in front of Buckingham Palace, their tall black hats rising high above the crowds. Many visitors thought they were strict, unshakable, and almost not human at all. But behind those bright red coats and quiet expressions, each guard had a life, a heart, and a story of their own. This part of the story begins by looking closely at some of the guards who stood behind the polished buttons and shining boots, ordinary people who happened to live extraordinary moments while doing their job. Sergeant Thomas had been a royal guard for nearly 10 years. He grew up in a small, peaceful town in the countryside, where everyone knew each other and life felt slow. As a child, he often visited his grandfather, who had served in the military long ago. His grandfather would tell him stories not of battle or danger but of teamwork, respect, and tradition. Thomas listened closely, his young mind painting vivid pictures of tall hats, marching boots, and a proud uniform that represented both responsibility and honor. When he grew older, he decided to join the service, not just for the uniform but because he believed in commitment and wanted to serve with purpose. His calm nature made him perfect for the job. Even though tourists often tried to make him laugh or distract him, he stood with patience that felt almost endless, always staying professional, yet quietly observing the world around him. Guard Lewis, on the other hand, was much younger. He had joined only a few years earlier and was still discovering the rhythm of the job. Before becoming a royal guard, Lewis worked part-time in a local bakery, waking up early to help shape dough and greet customers. He liked talking to people, liked hearing short stories from strangers, and liked making someone's morning brighter with a simple smile. When he joined the Royal Guards, he quickly learned that smiling during duty was not allowed. At first, it felt strange to keep his face still while so many tourists stood inches away, laughing, waving, and sometimes trying silly tricks to get a reaction from him. But Lewis had a gentle nature. And instead of feeling annoyed, he learned to appreciate how excited visitors were. He stood quietly, but inside he felt a soft sort of warmth, knowing that people traveled so far just to see the tradition he was now part of. Then there was Corporal Amir. He had moved to London when he was a young teenager. English was not his first language, and during his early school years, he often felt shy speaking in front of classmates. But he had a talent for focus, something teachers noticed quickly. Whenever there was a task that required patience, Amir would be the first to complete it with care. This ability stayed with him as he grew older. When he decided to join the Royal Guards, many people were surprised, but he saw it as a chance to serve his new country with pride. The training was challenging at times. Standing perfectly still for long periods required both physical steadiness and mental strength. But Amir found comfort in the quietness of the job. It felt like meditation to him, a moment where the world slowed down, and he could focus on what mattered: duty, respect, and presence. Although they wore identical uniforms, each guard had a different reason for being there. Some joined because their families had a long history in the military, others joined because they admired the traditions of the royal household, and some simply wanted a job that required dedication and brought them close to something bigger than themselves. But no matter their reasons, all of them learned one important truth: being a royal guard was far more than standing still. Every day brought new people, new weather, new tiny moments that only the guards themselves noticed. Morning usually began early for the guards, before tourists filled the streets, before cameras were lifted and excited voices echoed through the gates. The guards prepared with precision. Their boots were polished until they reflected the lights like small mirrors. Their uniforms were brushed and checked carefully, making sure every line and every button was perfect. The tall bearskin hats were placed with respect, and each guard took a moment to straighten their posture. Even though they did this routine hundreds of times, it never felt casual. It was like preparing for a stage play that the whole world was watching. Except this was not acting, this was real, disciplined work, rooted in centuries of tradition. Once in position, the guards became part of the scenery. To most visitors, they looked like silent figures who never moved. But from inside the uniform, the experience was very different. They could feel the shifting weight of the hat, hear the soft hum of tourists chatting, and sensed the small emotional stories happening around them. A mother trying to get the perfect photograph of her child. A couple experiencing their first trip to London together. A school group trying their best to behave while still bubbling with excitement. The guards noticed all these things, even though they never showed it. Sometimes tourists asked questions, not knowing the guards were not allowed to reply. Other times, people accidentally stepped too close, and the guards had to maintain their composure while gently ensuring everyone stayed safe. They learned to communicate with the smallest gestures, slight movements, a step forward, or a shift of posture. These gestures were subtle, but they often made a big difference. A slight adjustment could make room for someone who could not see over the crowd. A small movement could guide someone out of harm's way without causing alarm. But what people rarely realized was that the job required heart as much as discipline. The guards saw moments that were funny, sweet, or touching every single day. A toddler waving with so much enthusiasm that even the stillest guard felt a tiny laugh inside. Elderly visitors leaning on walking sticks but standing patiently just to witness the changing of the guard. Families taking group pictures, giggling when someone blinked or sneezed at the wrong moment. These human moments softened the long hours of duty. Sergeant Thomas often thought about how amazing it was that people traveled from so many parts of the world just to watch the ceremony he had practiced thousands of times. Guard Lewis liked observing little details, the way children pointed at the horses with excitement, or the awe on someone's face when they saw the palace for the first time. Amir was always deeply moved by how respectful many visitors were, whispering softly so they wouldn't disturb the guards. At night, when duty was done, the guards removed their uniforms and went back to their ordinary lives. Some went home to families, some cooked dinner alone in their small London apartments, and others met friends for a quiet evening walk. They laughed, they talked, they watched movies, and they lived lives that were full of human emotions completely different from the serious expression they held during the day. Being a royal guard was not just about standing still. It was about responsibility, presence, and connection. It was about understanding that even the smallest action could leave a lasting memory for someone visiting for only one day. It was about balancing tradition with kindness, discipline with compassion. And even though the world only saw the uniform, the guards carried inside them stories that were warm, thoughtful, and deeply human stories that showed their hearts were just as important as their training. This story begins by looking at who they were behind the uniform. 3 individuals with different pasts, but one shared purpose. What the world would soon discover was that even the most serious-looking guards had moments of kindness waiting quietly beneath their stillness, ready to show the softer side of tradition in the most unexpected ways. Each new day brought small surprises for the royal guards, even though the world believed their routines never changed. Behind their stillness, they noticed every sound, every movement, and every emotion in the crowd. Part 2 begins with the moments that looked tiny from the outside but carried gentle meaning inside the hearts of the guards, moments where kindness quietly guided their actions, even when they could not speak or show expression. That morning, the area outside Buckingham Palace filled early. A light breeze moved across the open space, and small groups of tourists began taking pictures, adjusting their cameras, and looking around with bright, curious eyes. The guards stepped into their positions with the same precise steps they had practiced for years. Their uniforms shone in the morning light, and their tall hats stood proudly above the heads of the crowd. Among them, Sergeant Thomas stood at his usual spot, steady and focused. But what made Thomas unique was not just his discipline, it was his ability to notice the world without letting the world change his expression. As the minutes passed, he observed a little girl, perhaps 5 or 6 years old, clinging to her mother's hand. Her wide eyes sparkled with excitement, but there was also a hint of worry on her face. She kept tugging her mother's sleeve, pointing at the guards, and asking something softly. The mother tried to calm her, but the child seemed unsure, maybe nervous about the tall hats and still expressions. Thomas, standing completely still, gently shifted his gaze downward without moving his head. He noticed the girl drop a small stuffed rabbit she had been holding tightly. It landed near the edge of the crowd, close to where people were walking by. Normally, Thomas could not break the posture or bend down, but his trained eyes followed the toy. A few people passed near it, almost stepping on it. The girl looked around, her eyes filling with fear as she realized her toy was gone. She tugged harder on her mother's hand, her voice trembling. Even though Thomas could not speak and could not show emotion, he felt a soft pull in his chest. He knew this moment would stay with her, losing something she loved in a place filled with excitement. With a slow and precise movement, one that did not break his discipline, Thomas gently took a single step forward. The motion was small but enough to draw the attention of visitors standing nearest to him. They stepped aside naturally, giving him more space. And in that small window, Thomas lowered his gaze slightly more, signaling a young man nearby, who quickly understood and picked up the toy. The man placed it into the little girl's hands with a warm smile. She hugged it instantly. Her face brightened, and her fear melted away. To others, it looked like a simple moment. To Thomas, it was a quiet act of care that he could offer without breaking the rules. Across the yard, Guard Lewis stood near the main walkway, where long lines of visitors gathered to watch the changing of the guard. His kind heart always noticed those who struggled to see. The crowd often grew thick during the ceremony, with people trying to get the perfect spot. That day, Lewis observed a person in a wheelchair positioned at the back. The person's companion was trying hard to lift a phone above the crowd to record, but the sea of taller people made it difficult. Lewis, though he could not speak or wave, gently adjusted the angle of his stance. He took half a step to the right, just enough to create a small opening in the crowd. His movement encouraged others to shift slightly as well, and suddenly there was a clear line of view for the person in the wheelchair. Their face lit up with gratitude, even though they knew the guard would not respond. Lewis remained still again, but inside, he felt a quiet satisfaction. He had done something simple yet meaningful, something that gave someone a better memory of their visit. Just a short distance away, Corporal Amir stood near the entrance gate. He always carried a soft awareness toward visitors who needed extra help, especially the elderly. That morning, an older woman with silver hair slowly made her way through the crowd. She walked carefully, holding on to the arm of her grandson. They reached the edge of the viewing area, but she struggled to stand for long. Her grandson whispered something to her, maybe asking if she wanted to sit somewhere. But she shook her head. She wanted to stay and watch the ceremony she had dreamed of seeing all her life. Amir's eyes caught this moment. He noticed how she shifted her weight from one foot to the other, trying her best not to miss anything. Though he could not talk, Amir made a very slight movement, a shift that encouraged the crowd in front of the woman to step aside. It was almost as if the air around him gently pushed people to spread out. A few visitors turned to see what caused the subtle change in formation, and without being told, they moved enough to create a perfect opening for the woman. She gasped softly, her face glowing with delight as she saw the guards clearly for the first time. She clasped her hands together in happiness, and her grandson whispered a thank you even though Amir could not reply. As the ceremonial march began, the guards continued to notice small moments that most people overlooked. A young boy who tried so hard to hold his camera steady that his hands shook. A family trying to gather everyone in one picture but struggling with the angles. A couple standing shyly, wanting a keepsake photo but too embarrassed to ask strangers for help. Even though the guards could not interact directly, their awareness allowed these visitors to experience tiny joys throughout the day. Lewis, who remembered his bakery days, felt especially moved whenever he saw children admiring the guards. Their innocence, their bright smiles, and their curiosity always made his heart feel warm behind the serious expression he had to maintain. He often wished he could tell them that he saw them, that he appreciated their excitement. But his duty required silence. Still, these small acts, slight movements, gentle adjustments, the kind of awareness that didn't need words, became his own quiet way of showing kindness. Thomas, though older and more experienced, felt similar emotions. He often thought about how people remembered the guards long after their visits ended. A single moment could become a story someone told their family back home. A simple gesture could stay in a child's memory forever. This understanding made every shift feel meaningful for him. Amir, who once felt shy in crowds during his younger years, found comfort in knowing he could make visitors feel welcomed without speaking. He felt connected to people in a peaceful, silent way. His actions were small, but the gratitude he received through people's expressions never felt small to him. Throughout the day, the guards continued noticing these gentle interactions. A young man offering his spot to someone shorter. A tourist holding an umbrella over a stranger during a sudden sprinkle of rain. A child who waved at every guard with sincere joy. These acts made the environment feel warmer, even though the guards themselves stood with firmness and focus. By late afternoon, when the crowds began to thin, Thomas, Louis, and Amir reflected quietly inside themselves. To many people, the royal guards appeared distant and unapproachable, but inside their hearts, they carried a deep awareness of the world around them. They cared about the people who came to see them not in loud ways, but in calm and steady gestures that blended seamlessly into their duties. Every day, they found new ways to help without breaking the rules, to offer comfort without saying a word, and to create small moments of happiness that visitors would take home, like souvenirs of kindness. These were not grand actions. They were tiny, almost invisible gestures, but they mattered. They mattered because kindness did not need applause or attention. It only needed a heart willing to notice, and the royal guards, behind their stillness, noticed everything. As days passed, the small acts of kindness, shown by the royal guards, continued quietly, almost like secret gifts hidden in plain sight. To visitors, each guard seemed like a strong figure built from tradition and discipline. But every guard carried a mind full of soft thoughts and a heart that noticed more than anyone imagined. Part 3 follows the gentle struggles and inner journeys that happened behind their calm faces, moments that the crowds never saw but shaped the guards into the kind people they were becoming. Sergeant Thomas had always been calm and steady, but the long hours of standing without moving required a special kind of patience. Some days were harder than others. The weather changed often. Some mornings felt cold enough to make fingers go numb, and some afternoons were warm enough to make the heavy uniform feel even heavier. But Thomas had learned to let his mind stay quiet instead of fighting discomfort. During those long shifts, he thought about his family back home. He imagined his grandfather's smile, the sound of birds in the countryside, and the peaceful fields he used to run through as a child. Thinking of these things made the hours feel lighter. But even with this inner peace, Thomas still carried a silent responsibility. He knew that many visitors looked up to the royal guards as symbols of strength. They believed the guards never struggled, never worried, never felt anything except discipline. Thomas knew this wasn't true, but he accepted it with grace. His real challenge was to balance being human while representing something greater than himself. And every time he helped someone through a subtle gesture, he felt he remained true to both parts of his identity: the disciplined guard and the caring human being. Guard Louis, who was much younger, faced a different kind of challenge. He was naturally warm-hearted and loved connecting with people. Before joining the Royal Guards, he worked in a bakery where he chatted freely with customers. He enjoyed laughing, smiling, and making small jokes. But as a guard, he had to train himself to keep his face serious at all times. At first, this felt strange. He missed the joy of talking to strangers and seeing their reactions when he made them laugh. Now, he had to look straight ahead, no matter how funny or heartwarming something was. And there were many funny moments. Children often made silly faces at him, trying to get him to smile. Some even pretended to march beside him, lifting their knees high in exaggerated steps that made nearby tourists giggle. Louis sometimes felt a tiny laugh rise inside him, but he held it deep, letting only his heart smile while his face stayed still. But Louis's biggest struggle was wanting to help more. He noticed every person who looked confused, every child who seemed scared, every visitor who felt lost. But he knew he could not break the rules. He could not lean down, touch something, or speak to someone unless it was necessary. This feeling of wanting to do more but needing to stay within the rules was a challenge he worked through every day. Still, with time, he learned that even the smallest gesture could mean a lot. A step, a shift, a quiet awareness. These things became his way to care without breaking tradition. Corporal Amir faced his own inner battles. When he first joined the Royal Guards, He worried about making mistakes. English was not his first language, and even though he spoke it well now, he still felt nervous sometimes when surrounded by fast-talking visitors. He feared misunderstanding something important or missing a subtle instruction from a superior. These worries made him feel tense during his early days on duty. But the more he worked, the more he realized that his strength came not from speaking but from observing. Amir had sharp eyes and a gentle mind. He noticed things others might miss, like a person who quietly stepped back because they didn't want to block someone, or a teenager who wanted to ask a question but felt too shy. He saw kindness even in crowded spaces, and over time, this awareness helped him overcome his nervousness. Amir's greatest struggle, however, was emotional. He remembered how difficult it had been to adjust to a new country as a young teen. He remembered standing in school, feeling unsure of himself, trying to find courage. Now, years later, he stood in front of Buckingham Palace wearing a tall hat and a polished uniform. Sometimes, the contrast surprised him. He wondered if someone in the crowd had once felt like he did, lost, quiet, trying to find a place in the world. Whenever he sensed that, he tried to help in his own silent way. His gentle movements became reminders to himself that he had grown stronger, more confident, and more capable than he ever thought he could be. All three guards had their own personal journeys, but something connected them. Even though they were surrounded by thousands of visitors each day, each guard struggled with something within themselves. They faced doubts, memories, challenges, and emotions, while keeping their posture steady and their expressions calm. The world saw their discipline, but the world did not see the challenges hidden behind their quietness. One afternoon, Thomas noticed a school group visiting the palace. Among the group was a boy who kept wandering away, touching the rails, and getting distracted by every little thing. The teacher struggled to keep him close. The boy looked curious and full of energy. Thomas recognized the familiar spark. He remembered having the same curious spirit as a child. At one point, the boy wandered too close to the rope barrier. Thomas wanted to guide him back, but he could not speak. Instead, he made a very slight movement, positioning himself so that the boy noticed him. Something about the guard's stillness caught the boy's attention. The boy stopped, blinked, and slowly backed up to rejoin his group. Thomas remained quiet, but inside, he felt proud of the tiny success. Meanwhile, Louis faced a different moment. A group of friends from different countries stood near him, trying to take a picture together. They kept laughing, trying to squeeze into the frame, but the camera kept cutting someone out. Louis wished he could step aside or help them find better space, but he had to remain still. After several failed attempts, one of them finally figured out the right angle, and the whole group cheered softly. Louis didn't move, but he felt the warmth of their joy. Moments like that reminded him that people did not just visit for the palace, they visited for the memories. Amir had his own meaningful day when he noticed a young woman standing alone near the gate. She held a small notebook and kept glancing at the guards with deep admiration. She looked peaceful but also a little unsure of where to stand. The crowd shifted around her, and she kept moving to avoid getting pushed aside. Amir watched quietly. When he saw her step back to avoid a large group and almost lose her view, he gently shifted his position just enough to open a space for her again. She noticed immediately, her eyes softening with gratitude. Even though he couldn't acknowledge her, her appreciative smile felt like a quiet friendship formed in silence. These small moments built up through the days. Each one was a reminder that even though the guards stood still, their hearts remained active. They learned that kindness didn't need words, it didn't need big actions. It only needed awareness, empathy, and the courage to show care within the limits of their duty. Visitors saw the polished boots, the bright coats, and the tall hats. But what they didn't see was the human journey happening inside each guard. They didn't see Thomas thinking of childhood memories to stay strong. They didn't see Louis training himself to help quietly when he wanted to do more. They didn't see Amir remembering his past and finding courage in his present. But these journeys shaped every tiny gesture the guards made. Part 3 shows that the guards were not just part of tradition. They were individuals on their own paths, learning, growing, and becoming kinder each day. Their struggles were gentle, their challenges silent, but they faced them with the same dedication they brought to their duty. And with every shift, every subtle movement, and every warm thought, they continued building a bridge between tradition and humanity, one quiet moment at a time. As days turned into weeks, the Royal Guards continued their work with calm dedication. Their shifts followed the same routine, standing still, watching crowds, marching with precision, but life always had ways of surprising them. Even the most traditional places sometimes held unexpected moments, and for the Guards, these moments became gentle reminders that kindness could shine through, even in the most silent roles. Part 4 follows the bigger, more noticeable moments, ones that surprised not just the visitors but even the Guards themselves. That morning began like any other. The air was cool, the sky light blue, and the palace grounds slowly filled with people excited to watch the changing of the guard. Children held small flags, adults adjusted their cameras, and groups chatted happily as they waited. The guards stepped into position with their usual steady rhythm. Among them, Sergeant Thomas stood tall, his posture perfect, his expression calm. As the ceremony approached, the crowd grew thicker. People leaned forward to see better, and the soft hum of voices filled the area. Thomas kept his eyes focused straight ahead, but as always, he saw everything. He noticed a young woman near the front beginning to sway slightly. Her face, which had been filled with excitement earlier, now looked pale. At first, Thomas wasn't sure if she was simply overwhelmed by the crowd. But within seconds, he realized she was feeling faint. Thomas knew he could not speak, but safety always came first. He made a sharp, precise motion, not aggressive, just firm enough to alert the other guards nearby. His small action caught the attention of a palace staff member standing close. They rushed forward carefully, guiding the woman to a nearby bench. The crowd stepped aside naturally, and the woman sat down while her friend fanned her gently. She soon began to look better, her color returning slowly. To the visitors, it seemed like the guards had simply reacted with perfect timing. But only Thomas knew how closely he had been watching, how ready he was to help even without breaking protocol. On the other side of the courtyard, Guard Lewis faced a moment that took him by surprise. A family stood near the rope barrier, a mother, father, and their little boy who looked to be around 3 years old. The child was filled with energy and curiosity, bouncing on his toes as he watched the guards. His parents held his hands gently. But children sometimes wiggle free faster than adults expect. Just as the ceremonial horses entered the courtyard, the little boy slipped from his father's grasp and toddled forward, his eyes wide with excitement. He had no idea the horses needed space or that the guards had practiced for moments like these. The parents immediately panicked, reaching out to bring him back, but they were a step too far away. Lewis acted instantly. Without breaking the rules, he took a smooth, precise step forward, one that placed him between the child and the path the horses would soon take. His motion was quick, but controlled, done with the same discipline he used in every part of his duty. The little boy stopped, startled by Lewis's sudden presence. He blinked up at the tall guard, his tiny hands frozen at his sides. At that moment, a palace staff member rushed over and gently guided the child back to his parents, who thanked them repeatedly. Lewis then stepped back into his exact position, as if nothing had happened. The crowd, once tense, now relaxed again. Some visitors whispered softly, amazed at how calmly and gracefully the guard handled the situation. Lewis didn't show emotion, but inside, he felt relief. He had not spoken. He had not broken formation. But he had protected the child in the safest way he could. Not far from there, Corporal Amir experienced a moment that would stay in his memory for years. A toddler was standing with her family, holding a small toy that must have been very special to her. It was a soft, colorful object that she hugged tightly in both hands. As she looked around at the palace, her grip loosened, and the toy slipped from her fingers and rolled toward the guard line. The toddler's eyes widened instantly, and she let out a soft cry. Her mother bent down to comfort her, but the little one kept pointing at the toy with tears forming in her eyes. Amir noticed everything: the toy, the tears, the mother's worried face, and the small crowd growing concerned. Amir wasn't allowed to bend down suddenly during duty. But in this case, he could make a gentle exception in the safest manner possible. He took one careful step, lowered himself with controlled grace, and picked up the toy. Even this small motion felt huge to the watching crowd, because royal guards rarely moved unless absolutely necessary. Amir then extended his hand and placed the toy near the child, letting her mother pick it up. The toddler's tears disappeared instantly, replaced by a bright, joyful smile. She hugged the toy tightly to her chest, whispering a small sound that seemed like a thank you. The crowd was touched. People smiled. Some quietly whispered to each other, and others simply watched with warm admiration. Amir returned to his exact standing position, eyes forward, posture perfect, but inside, his heart felt light. He had made a child's day better with a simple gesture, a gesture that did not break rules but showed the human side of tradition. Moments like these were rare. Not because the guards refused to help, but because they always had to balance their responsibility with their silent, disciplined role. Yet sometimes, life created situations where the right thing to do became clear, and the guards acted naturally from the goodness of their hearts. The unexpected moments continued throughout the day. A woman accidentally dropped her scarf near the fence, and Thomas subtly shifted to keep people from stepping on it until she retrieved it. A group of tourists looking lost found themselves guided subtly by Lewis's careful posture as he created space for them to move out of the crowded path. Amir gently directed a group of elderly visitors by standing in a way that helped them find a better view of the ceremony. Each of these moments carried a small spark of kindness. They were not dramatic. They were not loud. They were not actions that would be announced or celebrated in newspapers, but they mattered deeply to the people who experienced them. Later in the afternoon, when the ceremony was over, some visitors approached palace staff and shared their appreciation. They spoke of the guard who helped the fainting woman, the guard who protected the little boy, and the guard who returned the toddler's toy. They spoke with warmth and wonder, amazed by the balance the guards kept between discipline and compassion. The guards themselves stayed silent, returning to their routines. They didn't seek praise. They didn't need applause. They simply did what felt right in the moment. Their unexpected, gentle actions created memories for people visiting from all over the world, memories they would share with friends and family long after returning home. As the sun slowly lowered, painting the sky with soft shades of orange, the guards completed their final duties of the day. Their steps remained sharp, their expressions steady, but inside, each guard felt the quiet pride that came from knowing they had made someone's day a little brighter. Tradition was important, discipline was necessary, but kindness was a part of them that no rule could ever hide. And through these unexpected moments, visitors discovered something they never expected: that even the stillest guards had warm hearts behind their silence. As the days continued and the seasons slowly shifted, the stories of the royal guard's quiet kindness began to travel far beyond the palace gates. People who had visited Buckingham Palace shared their experiences with friends, family, and even online. They posted photos, wrote messages, and told small stories about the moments they saw, moments that showed a softer side of the guards. What began as simple acts became memories that many treasured deeply. Part 5 explores the gentle aftermath of these moments and how they changed the way people viewed the guards forever. At first, the guards did not realize how much attention their actions were getting. To them, each gesture was natural and small. Sergeant Thomas never expected anyone to remember the way he signaled help for the fainting woman. He thought of it as simply doing the right thing. He didn't think it was anything special. But the people who had been there on that day remembered it clearly. One tourist who witnessed the moment posted a message online describing how calmly Thomas reacted. The message soon spread, gathering kind comments from people who had never even visited the palace. Some wrote that they had always believed the guards were unapproachable, like statues with no emotion. Others said they now saw them differently as real people who cared about the well-being of visitors, even while standing tall and silent. For Thomas, who had always carried himself with quiet pride, This newfound appreciation felt warm in his heart, even though he would never speak about it publicly. He felt a gentle happiness knowing that people had understood the deeper meaning behind his actions. Meanwhile, Guard Lewis also became part of shared stories. The moment he stepped forward to protect the little boy spread quickly among visitors who had captured the scene in photos. The parents of the child later wrote a grateful message describing how thankful they were for his calm and quick response. They explained how their son had been excited and unaware of the approaching horses, and how Lewis's simple, careful movement had kept him safe in a way that felt both gentle and professional. Lewis never wanted attention. He simply hoped the child was safe and happy. But reading the family's kind words, later shared by a palace staff member who showed him, he felt a quiet joy. He thought about how he once worked in a bakery, how he loved helping customers, and how this job, though very different, still allowed him to help people just in quieter ways. Corporal Amir also became a heartwarming figure. A visitor had taken a photo of the moment he returned the toddler's toy. The picture showed Amir bending slightly, his gloved hand setting the toy carefully within reach. The child's wide smile was captured perfectly in the frame. When the photo was shared online, people from around the world reacted with excitement and affection. They commented on how thoughtful the guard was, and how rare and touching it was to see such a human moment in a place known for strict tradition. But for Amir, the memory was simple. He remembered the look on the little girl's face when she first cried, and the brightness in her eyes when she got her toy back. That alone made the moment meaningful for him. When he later learned that many people had seen the photo, he felt shy but also grateful. It reminded him of how far he had come from a quiet teenager unsure of himself to a confident guard who could bring comfort without speaking a single word. As these gentle stories spread, something beautiful began to happen. Visitors arrived at the palace not only excited to see the famous uniforms and perfect marches, but also curious about the people inside the uniforms. They looked at the guards with softer eyes. They approached with more respect. Even children, who once tried to make funny faces to break the guards' concentration, now waved sweetly instead, hoping to share a moment of kindness rather than distraction. The palace staff noticed the change as well. They saw visitors whispering happily about the guards, sharing stories from online posts, and pointing out the different spots where heartwarming moments had happened. It created an atmosphere that felt warmer, more connected, and filled with appreciation for the tradition and the people keeping it alive. The guards themselves stayed humble. Each morning, they prepared their uniforms as they always had, polishing their boots, brushing their coats, and placing their tall hats with care. Their routines stayed the same, their discipline unchanged. But inside, each guard carried a new sense of purpose. They realized that their job was not only about standing still or marching perfectly. It was also about being kind, aware, and present in a way that brought comfort and joy to others. Thomas felt this change most deeply. After many years of service, he already understood the value of quiet professionalism. But now he saw how even a small gesture could make someone's trip unforgettable. He stood each day with a deeper sense of meaning, knowing that people didn't just see a uniform anymore. They saw a person who cared. Lewis felt more balanced too. His warm heart finally felt at home within the rules of his duty. He learned that kindness didn't always need words or direct actions. Even a tiny movement could make a world of difference to someone. Knowing this filled him with calm confidence. He no longer felt torn between his friendly nature and his job. Instead, he realized they could work together beautifully. Amir felt the change in a quieter, more internal way. He often thought back to his early days in England, when he struggled to fit in. Now he felt proud knowing that his simple gestures touched the hearts of people from all around the world. These moments felt like gentle reminders that kindness was a universal language, one that required no speech at all. It made him feel connected to the crowd in a way that went beyond words. Visitors continued to share stories. A woman who had struggled with the crowd wrote about how a guard's gentle shift helped her see the ceremony clearly. A child proudly told classmates back home about how a guard saved his toy. Elderly visitors shared how much they appreciated the guard's calm presence. Slowly, these stories shaped a new understanding of the royal guards, not just as symbols of tradition, but as individuals with quiet compassion. Because of these moments, more people approached the palace with patience. They asked questions more kindly. They treated the guards with respect, understanding that standing still for long hours required strength people often didn't realize. Many came simply to watch the ceremony, but they left with something more, an experience that touched their hearts. As time moved on, the guards themselves became inspired by the kindness they received. Even though they could not smile, wave, or speak during duty, they felt the appreciation in the soft looks people gave them. It created a cycle of warmth. Visitors felt grateful for the guards, and the guards felt grateful for the visitors. This was the lasting impact of the unexpected moments. It was not a change in rules or a grand announcement. It was a gentle shift in how people saw each other, how silence could still carry kindness, how tradition could still hold heart, and how small acts could create big memories. And so, the royal guards continued standing proudly each day. They kept their posture, their calm faces, and their steady routine. But behind the stillness, their hearts were full. Their story became one of balance of discipline and humanity living side by side. And though thousands came to see the palace, many left remembering the kindness they witnessed, shared, or felt. Their silent actions left echoes. Their gentle moments became stories, and the world began to see that beneath the tall hats and bright uniforms were people who carried kindness in their hearts, ready to shine through at the most unexpected times.